welcome to Setting the Spark, the podcast for homeschooling parents of little ones who are looking for a place to find answers and meaning in your everyday.
I'm Lorian Magnus, homeschooling mom to 2 little girls. We are Charlotte Mason inspired, and at this point that means we are reading, playing, and going outside.
And I'm Destiny Kasarik. I have a 4.5-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter, and I'm what I like to call a homeschool enthusiast, just kind of in the research phase, trying to figure out when and how we want to start our family's homeschool journey. So we're going to be your host during each weekly episode, and we'll be talking with a member from our panel about topics and challenges that unite us in our homeschool journeys. Our panel is made up of 4 moms who draw their teaching inspiration from some of the most popular homeschooling philosophies today. The ones we'll be talking about are unschooling, classical, Charlotte Mason, and Waldorf. And if you're not even sure what those words mean, don't worry. We'll be asking all those questions. So pull up a chair to our table and let's have a chat. Okay, so today we have our favorite unschooling panelist and only unschooling panelist back in the studio with us. And we're so excited to have you back, Audrey.
Thank you.
Yeah. Last time, as you remember, we just talked about the basics of unschooling. We learned a lot. Listeners learned a lot. And you are back today to talk about some more specific things. And it's a little bit apt because it's been cold outside.
Yes, here in Georgia, it has been cold and rainy. It has rained like every day.
Yes.
For forever. Feels like.
Yes. And although we all love spending time with the kids, sometimes it feels like a lot of togetherness.
It's a lot of indoors.
When the weather is not as nice. So we would like to hear from an unschooling perspective, what are the fun things that we might be missing out on that you guys have found to be fun to do when it's just not fun to be outside?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's not like there's a magic unschooling activity book, you know, like unschoolers don't do different activities than anybody else does, really. But, with unschooling, you're really taking the lead from your kids, so it will vary a lot depending on their personalities and what they like to do. I have 2 girls, and they like to do kind of little fine motor things, which is great for me because they're willing to sit and do activities, which I think is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so during the cold, rainy months that we have been having here, we do a lot of reading. As you know, we talked about that last time. Reading is so huge in our family.
Have you finished The Hobbit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we finished The Hobbit. We're moving right along. We're on Percy Jackson, that whole series right now, which is fabulous. It's a really fun jumping off point to get into, like, Greek mythology, you know. I love that about that series. And it's cleverly written. It's funny. So they're really enjoying that. And then from that, we've been reading a lot of the Greek myths that go along with it, which is fun. So now they know, when Medusa comes up or, the Minotaur comes up in the Percy Jackson books, they're familiar with the myths that those come from. So it's kind of cool. It's a good, and that's like the magic of unschooling. You get interested in something, or the kids get interested in something, and then it's like a rabbit hole, and you go down, and it just leads to one thing and then another thing and another thing. So it's really fun to watch. So we're doing a lot of reading and cuddling up with our blankets. Baking is something that I really enjoy. I love to bake. I love to cook with the kids. And winter is just,
it lends itself well to
the
that.
best time to do that because it's nice and cozy and it heats up your kitchen. So, we're doing a lot of cooking, a lot of reading, a lot of art projects. That's just something that, again, that I enjoy doing. And so the kids just love to do it along with me.
Do you have a favorite recipe? Or what's like your favorite thing to bake?
I've gotten into the sourdough thing, which is very trendy right now.
I'm gonna have to talk to you about that later because I've been like buying it at the farmer's market. So
I have a starter. I can give you some,
awesome.
but I actually got it from another homeschool mom in my group, and then I've given it to other moms, and it's great because we all have the starter, and then if somebody kills theirs, you can just get it.
So it's kind of like the kombucha of bread.
Yes, it is.
What a great way to like describe it.
It is, exactly, because it's the fermentation thing that's so trendy right now. I do a lot of the sourdough bread. It's super easy too. Like it's just like you dump all the ingredients together and then you let it sit out overnight and then you bake it. So that's really good. The kids, they have gotten into watching the Food Network, which is super fun. I used to watch the Food Network all the time when I was single and lived alone. I just have it on for noise. But there's a show called the Kids Baking Championship that they like to watch.
Fun.
And it's so cool. There's these really talented kids on there that are baking incredible things. So that's gotten them really interested in like making cookies and cakes, of course, which not the best because then we eat it, but it's fun, and they have gotten creative with it and started wanting to invent their own recipes and things like that. So that's been really neat. That's another interest that's really just emerged this winter.
So since you mentioned the show,
yes.
So with unschooling, I know it's a lot of like it's child-led, right? So and maybe this is tangential, but do you guys have like a screen time limit or anything like that where, like I know my son would be like, I just want to play Mario Kart all day,
Yeah, that's a really interesting question too. And typically unschoolers will be a little bit more technology friendly than some other branches of homeschooling, I find. It's definitely a struggle for me. My husband is a computer person. He does software engineering for his work. And so technology is something that he's passionate about. So he really wants to share that with the kids. It drives me nuts a little bit. It's not my favorite thing. I'm not a big technology person. But I do think it's kind of all about having a balance. So I'm not anti-screen time. I do, like for just kind of watching TV, I usually say not until after dinner because that's just kind of a way to put a natural limit on things. And then we've already had a full day of activities and running around and being active and, doing other stuff. And then, of course, at the end of the day, everybody kind of feels like they want to relax. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a little bit of just chilling out at the end of the day. I will let them play some like ABC Mouse or, PBS Kids has some good games on their website. I'm a little bit selective about what they play. I don't, want to give them free reign of the internet at this point. They're still really little.
Right.
But, if they want to play some interactive games, and especially like they always play together. So it's like a group activity. They're talking with each other. They're helping each other. And, I think there's value in that. But again, I want it to be a balance. And I know how easy it is to get sucked into that kind of stuff and just end up on there all day. I mean, it happens to adults too. You look up and 4 hours later, where did the time go?
Right.
So, I do put some limits on it, but I'm not going to say no altogether to that stuff. I'm going to let them have some access. So, that's a thing that we can do in colder months as well.
Right, because you're inside more.
Yeah, but again, just balancing out with other activities as well.
Sure. Yeah, when you said the balance thing, that's exactly kind of what I try to live by. And I even tell my kids that's why we're doing that, basically to say, hey, our brains need a variety of things. So sometimes we need to be active. Sometimes we need to have a conversation. Sometimes we need to read. And sometimes we can watch TV. So I feel like that's kind of something that they could understand in a way that they could understand.
Definitely. So. Yeah. Increasingly as I get older, I've just come to believe that life is all about finding that balance of different activities and things. And, if they are on it too much, you can tell in their behavior. Like it will have a little bit of a negative effect.
Yes.
And I know how I feel if I watch too much TV or something, I feel a little bit cranky.
Yeah.
So, I try to make them aware of that as well, that this affects how you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know? But again, I'm not anti-technology. I think there's definitely a place for it. You know, a lot of the future careers are going to be based around that. And I don't have a problem with them playing with that as long as it's balanced with other things. So
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So another huge thing in my house, and I'm curious if this is everyone with kids this age or just me, but fort building.
Oh, yeah.
Fort building is huge.
Yes.
And I have kind of a love-hate relationship with fort building.
Do they clean up the fort?
No, that's the problem.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think there's so much to be learned from that. There's so much great communication that happens when they build forts together. There's like engineering challenges that are happening. There's so much creativity that goes into it. It's really cool, but then they want to leave it up forever.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll usually let them leave it up for a day or two and then say, hey, we have to take this down because this is a shared space. And,
Right.
You know, we do have a nature fort is what we're calling it.
Interesting.
That they have built outside, and that can stay because that's in the yard.
What's
And
it made out of? I'm so curious.
It's all natural materials. And this was my daughter's idea, my 6-year-old. She was like, we're going to build a nature fort, and it's going to be only materials found in nature. We're not going to use
How
any
cool.
man-made materials. So it's tree limbs that are kind of leaned up around the trunk of a tree that's in our yard, and then it's tied together with ivy
Oh, I love that.
and just all kinds of stuff. She's brought in some rocks and seashells and things like that. Yeah, it's actually really cool, and we've all worked together on it, but it's holding up pretty well, actually.
Oh, I need to see a picture of
I
that.
know.
Yeah, I'll have to
Take a picture,
bring
post it on our
one in.
Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, so fort building is huge. One of the cartoons that my kids are into right now is Voltron, which I guess is like a reboot of an 80s cartoon show. I wasn't familiar with it until they started watching it, but it's kind of like a Transformers type thing where all the characters come together and they form one big robot called Voltron, and they
Gotcha.
fight evil. So today they spent probably 3 hours building Voltron out of cardboard boxes.
Wow.
They like painted it and decorated it and made the faces, and they made like fake control panels on the inside, and they can
how
get in
cool.
it. So, you know, it's so fun to watch, and it's just, again, what they are passionate about at the time.
Did you suggest that? Were you like, hey, here are some boxes. Why don't you build Voltron?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of boxes around because we order stuff on Amazon.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a readily available material. But yeah, again, my 6-year-old, who is kind of the idea person, she came to me and was like, hey, I want to build something out of boxes. And I said, okay. So I got out all the boxes and put them in the living room. And then she had the idea that she wanted to make Voltron after that. And she recruited the 4-year-old, and they spent the whole afternoon working on that together. So
Wow. How awesome.
They just get excited about things, and then they just run with it. And it's so fun for me as a parent
definitely.
to watch. So
That sounds amazing. I mean, I remember like that distinctive, awesome feeling of being in the fort when you're a kid. You know, even if it's like the dining room table with a blanket over it, and there's just, you know, the tunnel of under the chairs. Like, it's just something, you know, magical. That being small, you feel like you're in this.
And it can take on
space.
so many different forms. You're right. Like there's the blanket for it, and then there's the cardboard box for it. My kids have made forts out of hula hoops. Pretty much anything they can get their hands on, they want to make a fort out of it. So that's a huge cold weather activity that we do a lot. And, you know, luckily living in Georgia, you know, it may get cold for a time, but it's not like we live in Wisconsin, you know?
True.
So we are lucky that we're able to get out.
Right. Cold to us is like, to me, this is Lorian. To me personally, cold is anything below like 50, 45, 50
And the
degrees.
rain is really what's kept everybody
No,
inside.
because if I have appropriate
lately.
clothing, I actually don't mind the cold, but it's the monsoon,
Right.
torrential downpour rain.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can only splash in puddles for so
Right,
long.
exactly.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So when you were talking about how they did Voltron, right? And then they painted Voltron too?
Yeah, we use these things called quick sticks, which are really great. They're described as solid tempera paint sticks. So they go
I've
on
seen
like a
those.
gel crayon, or like they're kind of creamy and smooth as they go on, but then they dry really quickly. So that's what they used. It's relatively mess-free.
Wow. BRB. Buying those right now.
Yeah, they actually were recommended on from one of my resources I'm going to talk about later, but Artful Parent, I don't know, for car trips, because they're very satisfying like a paint. Like the colors are rich and like I said, they're creamy, but they dry really quickly. So it's not so much of a mess, which is cool.
Yeah, which is always nice. Because that's, okay, so for me, with being inside so much, I feel like there's just so much more to clean up. Because if you are baking or you are fort building, I mean, a lot of these things require some extra work on the part of the mom.
You can tell that they've been done after it's done.
Yes. Yeah, that's a part of it. And that's just, I just feel like that kind of comes with the gig, it's okay with me. I think it's worth it for them to have these experiences, that we have the mess and I try to recruit them to help me clean up.
I was actually going to ask you.
It doesn't always work. But again, it's okay with me. It's the way that I handle that kind of thing from an unschooling kind of perspective is like I would treat any other member of the family. So, for example, my husband, I'm not going to necessarily assign him chores, but I'm going to say, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Do you mind helping me do such and such? And so that's what I do with my kids too. And I find that if I tell them how I'm feeling, like if I say I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I need help, they're much more responsive than if I just say, hey, you need to clean this up, Right. I'm not always perfect about it, but I try to go into it with that mindset because I think it makes sense to them when they can hear how I'm feeling. So
yeah, definitely. And teaching them empathy.
Yeah.
Right. And, I'm starting to see that pay off with the older one, especially. Yeah. She's starting to get it. And even the other day, she decided to clean up to surprise me, as a nice thing to do. And it's very rewarding to see her do that just to be nice.
Right.
And because she knows that it will mean a lot to me if she does that, rather than her being forced to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Okay, so you've talked about some cold weather. Do you do any seasonal specific things, whether that's, holidays or, winter celebration, anything like that?
Well, I always like to try to do, kind of follow the seasons and activities. I, of course, love Christmas because it's just so much fun. So there's obviously a lot of stuff we do around that. Again, it's not really any different than anybody else does at Christmas, but we do, stringing cranberries and popcorn and making paper snowflakes and decorating the tree and wrapping presents. They're just a part of everything that we do as a family, and we try to include them in everything. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. I like to garden. So as things get warmer, that's definitely something. And really any time of year, especially in Georgia, there's kind of something to be done in the garden. So we it's a little bit slower in the winter, but we try to kind of keep tabs on that all year round. And they each have their own little garden bed in our yard. And so they get to choose what they plant, and they're part of the planning and the selection of the seeds and then taking care of their little garden plot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do together. And I think very rewarding for them, especially when we're growing food.
Oh, yeah.
That's exciting for them to see how the food is grown and where it comes from. And then, of course, they're much more likely to eat it if they've grown it.
Right. You're growing broccoli and kale, ladies.
Yeah, actually, we do grow kale, and they will just pick it out of the garden eat it. Whereas if I serve kale for dinner, they're not going to eat it.
Right.
But they love to just go pick things out of the garden
and
eat it.
Right, because it seems so, novel.
Yeah. And, of course, in the summer, again, living in Georgia, it's super hot. So, anything that involves water is the way to go. We spend a lot of time at the pool or the lake, just running through the sprinkler, playing with the hose, all of that kind of stuff is good summertime activities.
Do you take summer off, or do you kind of, quote unquote, school year round?
Yeah, I mean, we can't really say that we take summer off because that's you're looking at it from an unschooling perspective. You're really learning all the time, and it's just a way of life. So there really is no way to take time off because you're always just doing what you do, and you're learning along the way. So we don't really look at it that way. I guess for me, when I was growing up as a teenager, I would take time off from my more structured things in the summer. But with little kids, we're always just kind of doing the same sorts of things and following their interests. So definitely nothing really changes about that in the summer.
Yeah. And this is a little tangential too, but you saying that, because I don't think we touched on this in the intro episode, but I know, unschooling, you're following the lead of your children, what they're interested in. Does it become more structured once they get to like a certain age, or is it always just kind of open?
Well, it did for me and my brother.
Okay.
And it was really, as we got older, my mom would kind of have little planning meetings with us, and she would say, okay, like, what do you want to do? What are your goals? And then we would kind of figure out what we needed to do to achieve those goals. And so both of us had the goal to go to college, and we knew that we were going to need a certain amount of math, a certain amount of foreign language, things like that to get into college and to do well. And so even though it became more structured because we had to do those things, it was still coming from us because it was our goal. So, we were motivated to work on our foreign language, to work on our math, to work on our science, or, any of those things that we needed, because it was all contributing to us achieving the goals that we wanted.
Right.
So, yeah, it still wasn't imposed by, our mother telling us this is what you need to do. It was, she helped us identify the things that we needed to do, but it was still coming from us, I would say.
Gotcha. So for your girls right now, like in the next couple of years, you don't see it becoming more structured? Probably
not. I do anticipate that my older one, at least, will probably be wanting to start reading at some point. So as that goes along, we'll just see what works for her. She has been pretty resistant to kind of structured reading programs. She mentioned about a year ago that she wanted to learn how to read, so I got excited, and I got a couple different reading programs. And then I would start them with her, and then she would quickly lose interest. And so instead of pushing that, I was just like, okay, that's fine. We'll take a break. We'll come back to it whenever you feel ready. This year, she hasn't really been interested in it. She loves books, and she loves to be read to, but she's just not quite there yet where she wants to be reading to herself, which is totally fine. She'll get to it in her own time. So, if she does get to the point where she's serious about wanting to learn how to read, and we find that a more structured program is what works for her, then we may see more structure happening in that way.
Okay.
But it will come from her and what she wants to do. So.
Okay.
Great. It must be that just makes me think of how much of an asset it is that you had the background of unschooling. And so, they will do this.
Yes.
Like, it's going to be okay. Like, I think that if you just selected this method based on, our podcast or, your own research, that there's always that little sense of,
yes,
I hope this is going to work.
Yes.
And I mean, I find myself doing that even with any parenting milestone you can think of.
Yes.
Saying, but will they ever do this? And I look back now and I laugh and I'm like, they did it. Of course they did,
I mean, that's the thing. And with unschooling, you have to think about all of these things, just like you think about how a child learns how to walk or how a child learns how to talk. Nobody has to sit them down and say, okay, now we're going to have instruction on walking. And, this is the first step. They see other people doing it. They want to learn how to do it, and they do it. And honestly, it works the same way for other things. It's kind of hard for us to comprehend because that's so far removed from kind of how it's done now, but really it works. And I am very, very lucky that I had the background that I did, because I know that it works. Like, I lived it. But it's a huge leap of faith for most people, and it's very scary because you're putting that trust in your child and in yourself and in your family that they're going to get there and they're going to do the things that they need to do to be successful. But you just have to believe in them and know that it's going to be okay. And that's why I always tell people, anytime you need a unschooling pep talk, you can reach out to me. And that's true for anybody listening to this. I am happy to be the one to hold your hand and say, it's going to be okay. And I promise you it works, because I know that it worked for me and my brother. And it can really work for anyone. But it is a little bit scary when you're not used to it, because it's so far removed from what most of us know.
Right. Yeah. And like in the present day. But if you think about like in a historical context, like how many geniuses or just regular people learned things in a way that we just do it completely differently now, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just because we all have a brain, and people have always had a brain, and it works a certain way.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like, you know, whosoever in 1400s didn't have like hooked on phonics, but they learned how to read. You know, people find a way, and people are inventive and resourceful.
Right. I mean, human beings are very naturally curious, and we want to learn, and we want to do better and more. And it's exciting. And that's, again, what unschooling is all about, is just embracing that natural love of learning that all of us have. And it's always funny to me because unschooling is often described as a radical form of homeschooling. And I'm like, it doesn't feel radical to me. It feels incredibly natural. And that is how people used to do things for thousands of years. And it really, formal schooling is a much more recent occurrence. But it's just what we're used to now. So the unschooling method seems radical to people now.
And now we're going to take a short break from our interview for a segment of the show I like to call Pep Talks with Destiny. It's just going to be a short message from me to you as an encouragement for your week. You are amazing. Yes, you. You with a complex mind full of talents and causes and quirks, with facets of womanhood, counselor, friend, artist, theologian. We are mighty mothers, constantly balancing each act. Quick to notice the tasks that weren't completed, the activities there wasn't time for, the friends we didn't see, the books we haven't read. But remember to admire yourself for the things you have accomplished. You, the keeper of your hearth, wiping faces and hands, cleaning up toys, working on top of everything else, taking the kids to their doctor's appointments or sports or dance or the park. The simple act of your willingness to love, to show up and try day after day. It's no small thing. Today, don't worry. You are amazing.
And now, back to our interview. I know, Audrey and I were actually talking before we started recording just about, occasionally feeling like, oh, are my kids not measuring up or something? But measuring up to what? Like, what is the standard that we are even looking towards? Is it public school? Is it, just something we've read online? Is it our friends? What is our, measuring stick for their progress?
Right. And part of it is really appreciating that each child is an individual. All people are different, and they are going to be kind of doing everything in their own way at their own pace. They all have their own gifts. And, it's okay if they're not going to be as good at a certain thing as some other kid their age. That's okay. They have their own strengths and things that they're great at. And, you just kind of celebrate those things, and, they'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of going off this, I'm curious, do you have like a designated school room in your home? Or it sounds like school kind of just takes place all over.
Yeah. I mean, as an unschooler, again, definitely pretty much the whole house is the whole world is our schoolroom. But in terms of how we've set things up in our house, we did try to be pretty intentional about certain things. Our main goal was that we really wanted the house to feel like a shared space for everyone. We didn't want the living room to be a showpiece, that the kids didn't feel comfortable, that they could have their things there, or they couldn't work on their own projects. So we really wanted it to feel like a space that they were comfortable using. I mean, pretty much the only space that is not kind of open to them is mine and my husband's bedroom. That's kind of our space. Yeah. But the rest of the house, is really shared space for all of us.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of kind of designated areas in the house that are used for different things. The living room we purposely left really open, lots of open floor space, and that's where our best fort building happens.
Yes, because you need that floor space.
Or, blocks, or just having a large space to be able to put out paper and work on some art or whatever we're doing. Having big open floor space is really great for that. And then we have what we call the playroom, which is kind of half toy storage and half arts and crafts storage. So I have a pretty extensive collection of art supplies. I'm an artist and I teach art at a couple different places. So I have a lot of art supplies kind of squirreled away. And I want them to have easy access to all of that. So whenever they feel creative and want to get in on something, they know where everything is. So I have a whole closet set up for that stuff with all our art supplies. My sewing machine is in that room. And I love to sew. My kids like to sew. So we do a lot of that. That's another good cold weather activity too, actually.
Yeah, sewing. Yeah. Did you make the scarf you have on?
No, I didn't. People always ask me that.
It's very pretty.
Thank you. It's from Target.
That's awesome.
No, I haven't gotten great at needlework yet, but I do love sewing. So yeah, we do a lot of that. And so that space is kind of multi-use. Sometimes they like to set up their craft projects in there. They each have their own little craft kit that has their personal craft supplies in it. And sometimes they like to work with that, or they'll just pull from the art closet and get out supplies. And then our kitchen dining room table is a huge hub of activity. That's where we do a lot of our baking, or, sometimes they do like to do workbooks just for fun, or coloring books. And a lot of that stuff takes place at the dining room table. Also, just like when we have discussions or family meetings, it's kind of the heart of the home and the center of a lot of activity. And then my pride and joy in our house is our library. So we live in this funky 70s house that is kind of split level and has a loft.
Oh, cool.
And so we converted the loft into a library space. It's a dedicated library space.
Gosh.
So it's got, rows and rows and rows of bookshelves. All along one wall is bookshelves. And our whole book collection, and I'm kind of a book hoarder, but I justify it because I'm like,
oh, me too.
We have to have a good library if we're going to homeschool.
Yeah,
and
that's
it is great
part of
because
the tuition cost.
Really? It could be so much more expensive.
And it is great because then when they have a question about something, we can just run up there.
Do you have a whole system?
That's what I was going to ask.
Like an
organization.
I don't
Dewey
have
Decimal
it
system.
written down like that. It's not a Dewey Decimal System, but I do have it organized by category. So I have a section that's for history books, and a section for poetry, a section for kind of math and science, nature. I have a section that's all seasonal books. So
that's awesome.
Usually I pull out the books for whatever season it is and bring those downstairs so that they're readily available. But we have all the fall books and the winter books, and then holiday specific books in one place. I have a whole section for graphic novels and comic books. I have a whole section for mythology.
Cool, Audrey. Oh, that's amazing.
So it's cookbooks. I have a huge cookbook collection, which I love. So it's great to be able to run up there. We're reading the Magic Tree House books.
Oh, we just started those.
Yeah, it's a great series.
We've read 2 so far.
And that's another example of something that's like a great jumping off point. You read it and you get excited about a certain topic. So, we were reading the Ancient Egypt one.
We just finished that 2 nights ago.
It's fun. They're fun books. I like it because it kind of models a good sibling relationship too, which is something I look for in books. And so then, they had questions about how pyramids were made. And, so I'm able to run up and get my book about ancient Egypt, and we can see pictures of the pyramids. And, it's nice to have that stuff on hand. And, we have the internet for that too, which can be good. But there's nothing like, having the paper book.
Yes, I totally
experience. And a lot of times they like to go up there and just, flip through things. And
do you have chairs? Is it kind of like a sitting area?
Yeah, we have a sofa up there, and we have a table for working puzzles, or
fun.
If you want to lay out some books. And then we have a corner that has a really low window that has beanbag chairs around it.
So fun.
And what they have done on their own, this is really cool, is they have set up an observation station there.
Oh my gosh.
So they took their binoculars up there, and the guidebooks are kind of in that corner. They just were there already. And so they'll sit on their little bean bags and look out the window with their binoculars. And then
this is just
look
goals.
up.
This is so homeschool goals. I
just want to be like a kid in your house.
It's fun. And then so yeah, they'll look out the window in their binoculars and they'll try to look up the birds they see and stuff. It's just really cool. And it's really cool that they just do it on their own.
Yeah.
I didn't have to tell them to do that. Sometimes they like to sit up there and draw the birds that they see. And that's another thing I was going to bring up about school spaces is we also have an art cart in every room of the house.
Oh,
and that's like a really trendy thing right now, too. There are these little carts you get at IKEA that are on wheels.
Like, and they're like 3 shelves or something.
And so I have mine organized with like drawing implements on top. So there'll be a little caddy that has like markers and pencils and glue and maybe a ruler and a pair of scissors. And then the middle shelf is just blank paper. And then the bottom shelf is coloring books. My kids are super into coloring books.
And you have one in every room?
And I have one almost in every room. We have one in the living room, one in the loft, one in the playroom, and one in the kids' bedroom.
Wow.
So except for like the bathrooms, the kitchen, and my bedroom, they're all over the place. And that way, whenever the mood strikes, you have your own little mini art supply collection.
I love that. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
I know. I'm like taking personal notes.
So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways that we have set up the house to be, intentional and
yes, it's like I said, the whole thing's a classroom.
Yeah, and that's another kind of big tenet of unschooling is having a resource-rich environment. You'll hear. And again, the idea is that if you're in a resource-rich environment, you will get excited about learning because you're going to see this stuff and you're going to want to know about it. And, again, maybe not everything is for you, but there's going to be things that spark your interest and get you excited and
absolutely
you'll want to delve in. And then the last thing I'll say about that is the outside space also we tried to consider.
Okay.
So we have our nature fort, which was totally the kids, and we have our gardens. And then we're also our backyard is really wooded, which is great to have access to kind of a wild area.
Yeah.
We'll see some cool animals down there sometimes. We had deer once. Not very often do we have deer, but we've seen foxes. We've seen possums, raccoons.
Cool.
We found a box turtle.
Oh, so fun.
Snakes. All kinds of stuff. So that's a great learning opportunity, too, is just having access to that wild space.
Yeah.
And then we have a tree house and a sandbox and a slack line. So we're kind of slowly working at turning that area into like a little bit of a natural playground.
That's exactly what Audrey, we're going to talk about after this. Because that's exactly, yes, we are.
Yeah,
because our
having
backyard
that
sounds
inviting
similar.
outdoor space to kind of encourage time outside. So
yeah, where do you find your inspiration for natural playgrounds? For me and the listeners to know.
Well, a combination. I mean, Pinterest is definitely a great resource for that. Yeah, you can definitely. It's like you can get sucked in and try to do way too much. But also visiting some of the nature centers in the area. We just went to the Dunwoody Nature Center, and we are members at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. Yeah. And going to those kind of places, you can get a lot of great ideas. So.
Very true. Yeah, because my husband actually found it was in a playground grade industrial, I guess, double slide, which is like a $2,000 slide he found for free on Craigslist.
Oh, great.
And so we've kind of tried to put it into because our backyard's also pretty sloped. So tried to do that into the natural slope. And we were wanting to even do some zip lines, but we've had some other house projects come up that have had to take precedence. But when we bought the house originally, the backyard was my least favorite part, but I'm really starting to see and love, the natural shade, all just the natural aspects that it has to offer. So I'm excited
I think
to hear
there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, it gets a little bit wild and crazy, but, I think kids having access to something like that is really valuable.
Definitely.
It kind of makes me chuckle about my whole discovery of homeschooling as an adult because with the question, what is your classroom like? I mean, that was totally me on Pinterest being homeschool classroom. I mean, not to say that that's a bad thing. And a lot of people have spend a lot of valuable time in very decorated and intentional spaces. But I do think it is so awesome to think of the potential of how to learn in every room of the house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just on an everyday basis.
Right. And it probably does depend on your
style.
style. Some people find a lot of benefit from having a dedicated place, especially if you're going to be doing lessons. I think having a space set aside for that can be helpful. But the way we live, it just makes the most sense for us to really think of the whole house as a learning space.
And I love when you were talking about your library, how I noticed you did not say the children's books are over here, and then the real books are over here, and I think that that's kind of a crossover with Charlotte Mason, the idea of the living books, and that good books are good books,
right?
And children are going to be interested in looking at.
Don't teach down to them,
right? Yeah. Are going to be interested in seeing beautiful, picture books or want to be read, information about something they're interested in. So when you said the season will change and you'll take like the winter applicable stuff like down, like, is that something where you'll tell them like, hey guys, this is over here? Or is it more like you place things and see if they want to discover them? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, what you're describing is usually called strewing, which is like you just kind of put stuff around and see if they discover it. Which is
that a real like unschooling word?
It's an unschooling thing. Strewing.
Cool.
I don't do it. I loved the idea of it when I first read about it because that was new to me. That's not something I did as a child, but I learned about it as an unschooling parent. So I thought, oh, that's cool. I love the idea of it. I don't find that I do it that much, actually, because it just seems a little bit, in practice, it's a little bit like forced or artificial.
Because you're like choosing what they're
you're
playing
still
with,
choosing
right?
And saying like, you're kind of placing a higher value on certain things, saying like, oh, I would really like you to be interested in this, which, if you're excited about something and you want to share it with them, then that's really authentic and that's great. But if you're like, I'm going to put all the math stuff here because
and hide everything else.
So you have to be a little bit careful about how you do it, I think. Usually when I bring the seasonal books down, I will, instead of just waiting for them to find it, I'll usually say, hey, I got out the winter books. If you guys are, wanting to look at them, here they are. Because sometimes they don't notice. They're not the most observant all the time. And there's no problem with that. But I think, I said in the last interview that reading is the best thing you can do for your kids' education. And I think that's great, and that's mostly true. But on second thought, I think the most important thing you can do for your kids' education is to model that sense of excitement and wonder about the world and be excited with them and excited to learn with them. So I think if you're showing them things or strewing things that are really exciting to you and you think that they'll genuinely really enjoy it, then that's a great way to think about it. If you're strewing things because you think it's something that like they quote unquote should be learning at this age, then it feels a little bit more forced and it's not really authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess so with strewing, is it the act of leaving things around for them to find, or is it the drawing too much attention to things that you're trying to guide them toward? I just wasn't sure which one
It's like kind of curating a certain set of things that you would leave. Like maybe you would set up a little table, and it can be really nice, but
it has a negative connotation for unschoolers?
Well, not necessarily.
No.
A lot of strewing is an unschooling thing, but I just approach it with a little bit of caution and kind of make sure that I'm thinking about the reasons I'm strewing something.
Okay.
Again, I would set up a little table that has some books about the ocean on it, and maybe I would put out some seashells and some ocean nature things, because we have a trip to the beach coming up, and I think they would be excited to learn about that stuff. That's a good thing to do, and it can be a really fun thing to do. But you have to then also, if they are not into it and don't want to do it, then don't get upset and be like, well, I went to all this trouble to put this stuff out, and now you don't want to do it. So, you just think about kind of your motivations for what you're strewing, and then be willing to let it go if it's not their cup of tea, I think as kind of teachers and parents, sometimes we put a lot of energy into planning things, and we really want our kids to be into the things that we're planning, and then we can get disappointed when they're
bitter.
Not necessarily. Maybe they're not necessarily interested in that, and we have to kind of respect them in their interests and say that's okay if that's not what they're into right now, and maybe they'll want to come back to it later, or maybe not.
Yeah. So speaking of planning things, it's January, and sometimes it's a good time to kind of take a pulse on, your plan for the year, or maybe even just your goals, long-term, short-term goals. And so I know probably a lot of homeschool parents are doing that right now. So we wanted to ask you about your favorite resources, and kind of just piggybacking on the idea of, indoor activities and ideas. So can you share with us a few things that are your kind of go-to?
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought about this in two categories. There's resources that are kind of for the parents about unschooling that will help you when you're having those moments of doubt and thinking, oh, is this really going to work? Having kind of a solid idea of the philosophy of unschooling is helpful for that. And so for that, I would say definitely read anything by John Holt. He is definitely the father of this movement. He's the one that coined the term unschooling back in the 70s. And so reading his books, he has How Children Learn, How Children Fail. There's one called Teach Your Own. Just look him up, and he has a lot of great kind of educational philosophy, and that's where unschooling really came from, is his works. As far as some kind of more modern stuff, there's a blog called Unschooling Mom to Mom, which is really comprehensive. It has a lot of great information on there, a lot of FAQs, pretty much anything that you are wondering about unschooling, you can go on there and find the answer. There's another blog just for inspiration that I really like called Happiness is Here, and it's an unschooling family that lives in Australia. And she just kind of tells stories about her family and what they do. But I would say she's pretty far on the extreme end of unschooling. She really applies it to every aspect of her life, and that may not be for you. But
what do you mean by that?
Like her parenting philosophy. Like, for example, she doesn't do limits on screen time and things like that. She lets her children choose their own bedtime. She lets them eat whatever they want, So she really is giving her children a lot of control.
In every facet.
Of their life, which, seems to work for them. It may not be for everyone. I know I'm not quite ready to give my kids all of that. I'm not quite ready to say, oh, we're not going to have any limits on screen time, But I think it's very interesting, her perspective, and she has a lot of interesting things to say and some good things to say. So I would look her up just for inspiration.
Yeah, and just to real quick, if you're scribbling down, all these, we're going to be linking them in the show notes.
Yes.
So no worries there. And then also on our website.
Yes. We have all the resources.
settingthespark.com. So keep going, because this is really golden stuff. I just don't want to stress everybody out here.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to have those links in there and check them out. I would also say just look on Facebook and see what your local groups are, because if you have any questions about specifics, homeschooling laws in your area, or sometimes finding local people that you can meet up with is just better than anything, and being able to talk to a real person.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I know in Georgia, there's several unschooling groups that are specific to this area where you can connect with people. So I definitely encourage people to do that. And then in terms of just resources for activities, my top two are Artful Parent, who I just love. She has so many great ideas for activities, and definitely cold weather stuff, because it's all kind of art centered. I find her so inspirational, and the way she sets up her art space is really cool. So you can check out her blog. She also has a great book, a couple of books actually. She has The Artful Parent and then The Artful Year, which is seasonal specific projects. And then the other one is Tinker Lab.
Okay.
Which is a little bit similar, but it's kind of broader. It does have a lot of art, and then it has a lot of science and just kind of hands-on activities. Both of these are geared a little bit young, because my kids are young. These are the ones that I'm familiar with. But those are probably my two favorite ones, other than, just scrolling Pinterest, which there's a lot of great stuff on there as well.
Yeah,
so
true. But it can get overwhelming. So it's nice to sort of have some sort of direction.
Tried and true. Yeah, recommended.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you kind of joked at the beginning about, even though we're unschooling, we do the same activities as everybody else. There aren't specific unschooling activities. But I mean, I would kind of argue that you guys are the experts at play, because you guys are doing, focusing so much on interest that, there's never any distraction from pure interest, like pure, genuine interest, which is going to lead you down paths that create fun a lot of the day. You know what I mean? And so who better to ask? You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, play is a huge part of what we do. And again, like, people say that the careers that our children will do are not even in existence yet, you know? And so to my way of thinking, the best thing that we can be doing with our kids is kind of encouraging their creativity and their critical thinking skills and communication skills.
Their confidence.
These are all things that are developed through play. You know, if they can kind of master those things, they can learn how to do anything.
True.
It's all about them, you know, kind of making those connections and exercising their brain in that way. It's going to make it really easy for them to pick up the other things that they need along the way.
Yeah, I mean, the fort building, I mean, that's future project management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely see my 6-year-old as a manager of something because she loves to direct.
She's the delegator, right?
Yep.
So I'm in for that. It's cool.
All right, Audrey, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing, giving us some ideas of what we can do until it warms up a little bit outside. So,
Yep, till the next time.
we want you to let us know how you're setting the spark this week. Tag us on Instagram with a post that gives us a peek into your homeschool day. And be sure to use the hashtag #HowISetTheSpark. You could be featured on our account and entered to win a monthly prize. All right, so for today's Spark Within, I have Life is Fine by Langston Hughes. I went down to the river. I sat down on the bank. I tried to think but couldn't, so I jumped in and sank. I came up once and hollered. I came up twice and cried. If that water hadn't been so cold, I might have sunk and died. But it was cold in that water. It was cold. I took the elevator, 16 floors above the ground. I thought about my baby and thought I would jump down. I stood there and I hollered. I stood there and I cried. If it hadn't been so high, I might have jumped and died. But it was high up there. It was high. So since I'm still here living, I guess I will live on. I could have died for love, but for living I was born. Though you may hear me holler and you may see me cry, I'll be dogged, sweet baby, if you gonna see me die. Life is fine, fine as wine. Life is fine. We've loved having you at our table. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and visit us at settingthespark.com to learn more about your hosts and our panel of moms. You will also find resources that you may find helpful in your homeschool practice. See you next week. We'll save you a seat.